Cool. All righty, bow hunters, welcome back to another episode. We tried this one. It didn't quite pan out the way we needed it to with the recording side of things. So we are back again for Mr. Summers. You've joined me for 2.1, we'll call it, because we've already done 2. It just didn't work out.
Yeah.
But mate, Ian Summers, welcome back. I would love to actually say, firstly, the first podcast we did is probably the most influential bit of content that I have ever put out on becoming a bow hunter. And I say that because it's had the most listens of all the podcasts that I've done, but it's also been the podcast that most people reference when they reach out to me and they say, mate, thank you so much for what you've done with the podcast. Thank you for that podcast in particular. It enabled me to go and get the bow that was actually perfect for me. So I guess as a first piece, I want to say thank you to that. But also, if you're new to the podcast, then make sure you jump back and listen to it. It was actually the very first episode I put up, the first episode with the guest, which was Ian Summers, who came in and we did the talk on pretty much picking the right bow for you to start with. And I think, as I just said, it's been pretty transformational for a lot of people's bow hunting journey. So thank you.
No, well, thank you, mate, for the opportunity. And I still, to this day, probably once a month, get a phone call or a text message or someone ringing up saying that I've just listened to the podcast. So it's still going. Like, it was obviously a good one.
It's powerful. It's pretty crazy how powerful a bit of content can be, right? Like we put that up 4 years ago. Over 4 years ago, we recorded that and put that together. And it's just shown to be such a great thing, such a good reference point for so many people. So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of it lacking, and it's obviously getting better now with education, obviously with these podcasts. That, how many are you up to now? Like nearly 100, isn't it?
Yeah, mate. I think you'll be this will be maybe 95, 96, something around that.
Yeah, how good's that?
Yeah.
And so look at your journey. You know what I mean?
Crazy.
Listening to you on the very first one, how green you are, to now you're a pretty successful, bow hunter now, and you actually are getting it, and you can actually be really good with what these questions are that you're asking. I've seen the journey, listening to them all.
Yeah, definitely. It's been very, very interesting. It's the biggest thing to me. I was thinking about this the other day. I came into it really wanting to provide meat for the family, and I've literally just done a year of over 90% of our meat intake was from hunting, which is incredible.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, how far it can come, leaps and bounds. So something that happened recently is you've moved up to Brizzy, you've moved your shop. So you were down in Sydney, which meant people could always send their bow to you, and they still can, but it was not something that I had ever done. And so as soon as I heard you're moving up, I was like, mate, I'm getting my bow tuned by Summers. Like my bow, I got new strings on it. It wasn't shooting quite as right as what I wanted it to. And it just left me lacking a little bit of confidence. So I was like, as soon as you're ready to rumble, and I think I heckled you for a good month. I was like, Summers, are you ready? Are you ready? As soon as you were ready, I got myself in. I came along. We had a tune up, and then we spent the day working on my technique, which I kind of want to unpack that whole process. But I think the first thing to do, is it pretty similar, the process you go through for every single bow to make it get to its tune state? Like, is it, I guess realistically, there's probably different ways to skin the cat, right? But you've got your process and the way that you go about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said it perfectly. Like everyone can do it differently to get to the end result. All right. Mm-hmm. And that's where I have my system now that I get a bow, especially if it's a new bow on the market, a brand new one that's just been released, and I get my hands on that, I will actually spend more time on that bow. Like on that day, I'll allocate extra time, because what I'll actually do is I'll shoot that bow, and I'll play with it. I'll play with D-loop heights. I'll play with where the rest is. I'll play with timing. I'll play with just how it aims. And I've got that process, where I work out on a lot of bows where the D-loop works the best for that bow to aim the best. And I can understand, back in the olden days, you used to do what they call tiller tuning. And so with us shooting fingers, I started when I was, 15, all right? So we used to have a recurve.
5 years ago.
Yeah, 5 years ago, just a couple of days, And So we used to shoot fingers with the recurve long bows, and then obviously compound bows, and I used to shoot 3 fingers under back in those days. I used to anchor on my jaw, and so I could look over the top of the arrow, and I used to gap shoot. And with doing that, obviously where the arrow sits in the middle of the bow and you're pulling more from the bottom limb, that you used to tiller tune so it would aim better for you. So basically you're untuning the bow, but you're tuning it to how you're shooting.
Yeah, definitely.
And so with that mythology of doing that, when you get the new bows, it's the same scenario, you know what I mean? Like where you actually hold the bow is normally below center of the bow, unless you're using the prime. They design their bow so you shoot through the center of it. And so you have to take that into consideration with how the bow wants to aim. And and what I've just worked out is I'm 29 inch, so I work everything off from that. And then if I get, obviously it's getting harder the older I'm getting when I get 30, 31, 32 inch bows to try and tune them, because I'm basically wrapping it around behind my ear. Luckily, back in Sydney, I used to have a couple of really good mates that were tall and strong, so I just call them up and say, here, shoot this for me, and we'd work it all out, you know. But now it's just sort of a bit harder. But they definitely aim better in certain circumstances on where that D loop is, and that's where I found, as being a competitive archer, I've gone through that process to get the bows to shoot how I want to. And then when I tune someone's bow, I'll know that if it's 29 inch, bang, it's going where I set it. And then if it's 30 inch, I'm going to set it to a different place. And if they're 27, I'm going to set it to a different place. And then I'll work out from there, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Something that really kind of blew me away, I was explaining to you about how I tend to like a slightly longer D loop, and you were like, well, realistically, if you've got your D loop set up properly, whether it's a left or right-handed, it's going to really transition how you shoot anyway. So as long as that's correct, it should fix the problems essentially that I was having.
Yeah, and that's been a huge thing. Like I don't know how many times I see it a week tuning bows, plus on social media posts and all that stuff. It's just something I'm always looking for that stuff. I'm looking for new articles. I'm looking for what other people are doing at the moment, so I can always be at the top of my game. You know what I mean? And I cannot believe how many shops put left-handed D loops on right-handed bows. And by saying that, I'll try and explain it to people, it's how the knots are tied on which side of the bowstring is, so so when you are twisting your hand, so it's not as critical on a I call them a go-get-'em release aid, you know, like a finger release aid.
Yeah, the triggers.
The triggers, you know. It's not as crucial because most of them are sort of pulling directly behind the string. But if you're shooting a hinge, resistance, you know, a thumb, where you're pulling the bow back and then you're twisting your hand like that, if those knots are on the wrong side, you've got to think about it. When a compound bow comes back, you're shooting 60, 70, 80, whatever it is, it rolls over into the valley from 80 pounds, say, we'll just say 80 pound, and then you're holding, say, 9, 10 pound at full draw. You can manipulate that hand, which is also going to twist that string slightly, which also can give you left and right arrow flight, because it's twisting the knot. But it's something that's so simple. It's something that's just left. You know what I mean? And I just look at it and I go, you'll hear me always talking, and everyone around us is about 1%. You know, if you can change 1% there, and then the next minute you change 1% with your P-pipe, 1% with something else. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things where all of a sudden you're gaining something that you've never had before, and it was so simple to change. And it's really simple to do it. It's the same as how I actually tie my D loops. I only tie one knocking point at the bottom, right? I don't do the normal one where you see people tie a knocking point at the top and a knocking point at the bottom. I once again, if you go back, let's sort of just, what I'm talking about here is you leave it out from the primes, because the primes are obviously a different beast. You've got a smaller cam and a big cam to obviously change all that, so it works more efficiently, you know. But on a normal bow, you're about 2 inches above where the center is, you know. And so you've got to think about that. There's a longer part at the bottom and a shorter part at the top, so your leverage point's different. Why would you tie the knocking point top and bottom? Because when you come back, your D loop actually is pulling on a different way, because obviously they're not equal.
Yes.
So then your actual release aid if you have a look at photos and stuff like that, and I can put some up on my, or I can give you some of the ones that I've taken of people where it shows it pretty full on, where the release aid is actually above the arrow center line by quite some, right?
Yeah,
and then when I do that, because you're counter leaving the pulling from, because of the different lengths, that one knocking point down the bottom will bring your D loop perfectly, or your release aid perfectly behind, and your D loop behind the arrow knock. So therefore, it's going to help you with arrow flight. It's going to help you with the consistency.
Definitely.
There's sometimes there where you hear guys talking, they go, I'm just shooting a little bit high, and I'm shooting a little bit low, and I'm shooting this and I'm shooting that. Half the time it's your D loop.
It's crazy, right?
Bit of a twist. Yeah, it's just points given away, which are really easy to keep.
And that's the thing, like you would essentially, we're all trying to be as accurate as possible, and we're going to maneuver and do the things that make it seem accurate. So if your bow isn't tuned in correctly and you've got these little, like you said, 1%ers that are off, all of a sudden you're training yourself to do shooting in an incorrect method, which carries across then, right?
It's the same thing. You can be the most diligent archer and bow hunter ever, but you're throwing points away because the bows isn't set up. Biggest thing for me that I see through the shop is draw length and peep height, which are incorrect.
Yeah.
And then obviously the D loops, we've already spoken about that.
Draw length, people going too long or too short?
Most of the time it's too long.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And so that causes them to be really overextended almost in the
100%. So when you'll see people that are shooting, and then what they do is when they're drawing back, you'll watch them do this, right? And they're trying to get it up here, but they're just pushing their shoulders back. And
so if you're just listening, essentially it's like a shrug of the front arm holding the bow.
Yeah.
A trap lift or a shoulder lift.
And that also is the same thing with poundage. Most of the time with too much poundage, that's where that shoulder comes in, because it's, for some reason, when they're pulling the bow back, they've gone over the cam into the valley, and they just want to hold it there, and it gives them a bit more rigidity, because when their shoulders are dropped and that, and all the muscles are supposed to be getting activated in your back, they can't activate it because they've just done a pooper valve pulling the bow back. You know what I mean? So they just won't allow them to activate the right muscles.
Yeah.
So
what's your thoughts around poundage and being able to draw it back? What's like a typical standard that you should be able to do with your bow to know that if you're over pounded or not?
A lot of the things that we've always spoken about, like in Cayuga Adventures and all the guys like Brad and Matt and all those guys, if you can't draw the bow back sitting on your ass, you're overbowed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's really something simple. Back in the olden days. Yeah. Back in the olden days, it used to be, if you couldn't draw your bow back on your left arm, like if you couldn't draw it if you're right-handed, if you couldn't draw it with your left, you're overbowed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was back 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But nowadays, like if you can't sit on your bum and just draw your bow back and then all let it down really nice, and you see it, it's sometimes a bit frustrating when you see a lot of the stuff on YouTube and that, where a lot of the guys, it's almost a sky draw, but it's
definitely
right on the cusp of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I was
and then you look at it. Yeah, and you sort of look at it like that, and you're going, why are you doing that? If you're a bow hunter, it's shit form, because
how much are you going to scare away an animal with a big wave of a pull?
Yeah, how much are you waving at it? You know what I mean? Like, if you can't just put the bow right out in front and slowly bring it back to a very nice anchor point, and then just get everything going, well, you're once again overbowed. You know what I mean? And it's definitely, I think nowadays it's definitely not as big a trend that what it used to be 10, 15 years ago, where speed was the be all and end all. And you used to get, like, the PSC Omen was 370 feet a second and 5-inch brace height, and you sort of went, wow, that's pretty impressive. But you tried shooting it, and they weren't a very nice boat, because you've got to get speed from somewhere, don't you? You know what I mean? So it's going to be a harsh draw cycle. It's going to be a short valley, and it's going to have a lot of kick in it. You know what I mean? So nowadays, with the modern, like the last 15 years in archery has just gone absolutely ballistic with the engineering of these bows and all that. and for me, I'm a bow tech guy, as everyone sort of knows, is the tunability of a bow, and the bow that comes straight out of the box. You've got one module that goes from 26 to 30 or 31, depending on what bow it is, and then you've got the deadlock system, or you've got double yokes, or all those sort of things. You've got the elites that have got the twist, the limb rocking system and all that. And you just look at, to me, those bows, they're pushing the boundaries, because let's face it, the speed is the speed. We're all sort of, can you get much more speed out of it and shootability? I don't think so. I think 350, 360 is pretty full on, you know what I mean? And if you have a bow that's doing that 330, 340, and then you obviously take it off with adding weight to the string with your D loop and your peep sight, cat whiskers and all that sort of stuff, it's obviously going to reduce with each inch draw length, roughly 10 feet you're taking off plus some, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'd rather have a quiet bow that's will aim really well, and you're not scared of shooting it, you know what I mean?
Definitely. That was actually something I was very surprised with, was the amount that the tuning you did made my bow so much quieter. And I already thought my bow was pretty quiet.
Yeah.
But with what you did, and you put whiskers on it, we shot it a few times, like, mate, it's too loud. I was like, what? Because I didn't have anything to really reference it to. You're like, it's too loud. I'm like, okay. And so you put the whiskers on, you did a few things, and it's like near silent. It's crazy, the difference. I actually, since you've tuned it, I've noticed my arrow noise more than what I have ever noticed before, because I don't hear the snap of the bow as such. I hear the of the arrow flying away from me.
Yeah. So that's it. Like, that's all we want, you know what I mean? And it's funny, you're correct in what you're saying, because you'll get that bow and you'll understand, like, you'll shoot it, you shoot it through paper, and that's only one part of the tuning. Like, you see it so often with people advertising, where they go, it's shooting lasers through paper and then send it out the door. Well, yeah, you've got good timing, you've got good arrow flight, good knock height, flight. And
sounds like a rifle.
It does not mean that it's going to be broadhead field tip tuned. You might still have to tweak it here or there to, get a rest movement, or put a yoke twist here or there, and all that sort of stuff. And like, I get clients that are very full on with that, they need to see the perfect bullet hole, and I'll give them a perfect bullet hole, and then I'll go out and broadhead tune it, and then they'll come back in, and then I'll shoot it through paper, and it might have a slight left tear, it might have a slight right tear, depending left or right. And they go, it's out of tune, can you put it back into paper? And I said no, because our ultimate goal at the end of the day is how you're shooting that bow, how you're holding that grip, and whatever it is, our end result is, you really want to get a broadhead field tip tune. You don't really want to eat paper, do you? So why are you worrying about it? Why is it such a big thing? But that's the way you see guys on the internet, and they have a group there with a bare shaft, and it's something that I just sort of laugh about, you know what I mean? Like, when was the last time you seen someone shooting an animal with a bare shaft, or on a field course 3D shooting with a bare shaft? You know what I mean? Like, once again, it's a process. I understand it's a process, and I understand it's a tuning process that people do, but some people I see doing it, they don't even have electrical tape or heat shrink on the back of the arrow to simulate the same weight as the fletching.
Yeah.
So that you're changing the FOC, you're changing the dynamic spine of that arrow, but you're still trying to tune that arrow to the other two with a broadhead and a field tip. You're sort of pushing shit uphill, and then you're going down that rabbit hole of trying to chase something. And then at the end of the day, you sort of look at it and you go, okay, I've got my broadheads hitting, I've got my field tips hitting, I've got this bare shaft hitting. I'm the best tuner in the world. Unreal. Look at me. Look at these photos. And then you go, yeah, but is the bow forgiving? Right? And this is where a lot of people aren't picking up on what's getting said. I remember there was one podcast with Garrett Weaver, with On Point with Garrett Weaver, with Greg Poole, who's AAE. He's a pro archer, used to be bow junkie and all that. And I really like what he sort of says. He's a bit abrupt and all that stuff, but he says it how it is, and I like that.
Yeah.
And he was talking about shooting bare shaft out to 100 yards, right? And I was sitting there and stopped what I was doing and replayed it. And I said, did you just say that? So he was shooting his bare shaft out at 100 yards. And then I was thinking, that's amazing. And then The next thing he said was, I always carry a bare shaft in my quiver if I'm out reading or something like that and something feels off. And I know at 20 yards, my bare shaft has to hit low and right for that bow to aim and be shooting on. Right. So you think about it, at 20 yards, it's an inch low and an inch right.
Yeah.
So where's that arrow, that bare shaft, right? And that's after his group tuned his bow with a lizard tongue and done all this work, right? Where he's gone to one point where he said, at 100 yards, I can group with a bare shaft. And then his next comment, he says, at 18 meters, 20 yards, it shoots an inch low and an inch right. Okay. So that means he's got a high left tear through paper, but that's where his bow aims. Same as Paige Pierce. She always does little posts about that. So I'm going, why would you sit there and waste your time for so long to try and get an end result where the bow doesn't shoot as well as when it's so-called out of tune shooting through paper?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I don't even care.
Like, all you're looking for is actual shootability at the end of the day.
100%.
If you're a bow hunter, if you're if you're a target
point.
archer, right? Like if you're aiming for the end result is where the arrow lands.
And I get it if you're a professional archer, because you've got to tick every box in your head to give you that confidence to walk out there. And that's his confidence that he knows that if something's off, he's got to hit low right, because obviously his tear's there and that's where the bow's tuned, where it's grouping and all that stuff. I get it. But I look at it, I'm running a business here. If you want to play with that and the end result, it's not going to be really what you're after. The end result is you want that bow to sit there in the heat of the battle, whether it be at a 3D and you're shooting a really good score, you want to win, you want to beat your mates and all that, or whether it's the biggest stag in front of you, the biggest boar in front of you, you want that bow just to sit there for you and you're not fighting it. That's more important to me.
It's something that we use in the marketing world quite a lot. It's sell them what they want, not what they need, and then you give them what they need. That's exactly what you got to do with the bow tuning, right?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'll if someone wants me to do it, I'll do it in front of them. I'll say, give me your bare shaft and I'll do it. No problems. I can do it. It's not a big deal, but I just look at it and go, it's a waste of time, in my opinion, for,
definitely.
If your bow's tuned, your arrows are where they should be, the right spine, the right length, and doing everything else that we do, to me, it's not really viable.
I mean, this is all from your background in archery, competitive archery, but also within the years that you've been bow hunting. Like, have you bow hunted and done competitive archery the whole time, like side by side?
Pretty much, yeah, exactly. Like, I got into archery at Little Old Bowman down there in Victoria, and basically as soon as I could, back in the ABA, you had to go through a proficiency, like, to make sure that you weren't a rat bag and go and shoot shit that you weren't supposed to. And then as soon as I got that, I was like, look out, rabbits, I'm on you. You know what I mean? Yeah, and I was young, full of beans, and I was probably hunting 3 times a week, and just being chaos, from starting from a little green recurve that's, I don't know, it probably would have been 25 pound if lucky, and buying wooden arrows. And I used to actually paint them with friggin', back then, the fluorescent paint, so I could try and find them better. You know what I mean? It was pretty cool back then.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And so did you, was there anything that ever came up, so for instance, a big stuff up that you did or a big failure that you had that made you go down the route of really wanting to learn to tune your bow more?
Oh no, I was really lucky. Like, I was super fortunate. Back in the old days, there used to be, it was a really funny name in Glen Waverley. It was a shop called the Knock Shop, and and it was an archery shop owned by Bob Bell and Noel Smith, and they were both club members. And Bob Bell was an extremely good archer. He was a Kiwi fella, and for some reason, me and him just clicked. And I just got put under his wing, and he was one of those guys in ABA back in those days. He was probably one of the very first guys that put sights on a bow, and he did not give a shit on what anyone said. And he was a pioneer, and shooting a release aid the same. And so I was lucky enough to go through the ranks of ABA and all that when I was a young fella, and get up to masters with, shooting bare bow and all that stuff. And then once I sort of got to that goal, I just went, well, I'll move on to release aid and sights, because I want to be better for hunting. I don't want to be sort of wanting to wound animals, so I wanted to go down that route, and that's where I was super lucky. And Bob and Noel, like, it was just a fantastic environment in that shop. It was one of those shops back in the day where you'd go down there on a Thursday and a Friday night, and you'd basically be tickets only and cup of teas and videos up there of the old, Brett Verkos and Brad Smiths back in the day, and just playing non-stop and arrows getting flung. And that was the day where you could use the release aids, you could shoot all the bows in the shop, and you could do all that. And, it was just a happy environment to learn from, and I've just been so passionate with it. It's just been my life. You know what I mean? Yeah. Since then, I'm a super competitive person too. So it's like, when I go into an archery comp, I don't want to go there for second. You know what I mean? And I'll do everything I possibly can to within the rules, obviously, and to do it. So I know that. And that's where I was lucky with my father. He took me up to there because I was too young to drive, and then he became a bow hunter as well. And then Dad, obviously being older, started making strings, and then we made strings together, and then we started tuning our bows. And back in those days, like, I'm sounding like a frigging dinosaur here, but it was like steel cables with this thing called a teardrop on it, and then you'd have only a small piece of string in between the bow, where you actually put your peep sight on. And your D-loop, or back in those days, we even used fingers, you know what I mean? Like, it was crazy. But now you look at it, that's where I've been lucky, because I've seen the whole transitional period of the old bows. Like, my first bow was a PSC phaser, which was a bracket bow. So it had the limbs that come up, and then it had, like, I don't know, I reckon they'd probably, thinking back at it, they'd probably be 70 mil, like triangle brackets with sort of bracing in them, and the wheel would have been an inch wide of plastic, like what was it called, Bakelite it was called back in those days, and it had the cables running through, and you sort of imagine shooting that thing now to break your elbow joints,
Yeah, definitely.
So there wasn't much tuning on those bows except doing the old tiller tuning and trying to work out stuff like that. We had little old rests and stuff like that where you'd be trying to play with all them. And now I just look at all the stuff that's on the market, and it's just, if I had some of those bows when I was that young, Jesus Christ, and stuff would have died.
Definitely. It's pretty crazy. I was talking to a mate actually just recently, and he hasn't shot his bow for ages. He's just been way too busy with work, and he was going on a hunt. So he got his wheels out and took a shot, and he's like, mate, I've still got it. And it's just like having the ability to have a bow that is so accurately tuned and being able to step away and come back to it. Like, I don't think you could do that with the recurve, but being able to do it with the compound, it is actually very doable. I'll go through periods where I won't shoot my bow much at all, and then all of a sudden I'll pick it back up, and it might be a little rusty, but it doesn't take long to get back to it.
And I've always said that to people. If people that shoot a recurve really well, to me, I look up to, because I know how much work they've gone into to get to that stage where they can pull back, whether it be 50, 60, 70, like Jack Spinks does, you know what I mean? Like, but I look at them and go, when you're being accurate out to 20, 25, 30 meters with those things, it's pretty good. And like, I was absolutely blown away last year up at Cayuga Adventures. We had, I think it was about 4 or 5 clients that come through with the old struggle stick. And when they'd walk out, you'd sort of look at it and go, well, this is going to be a good week. You know what I mean? And honestly, all the guys that shot, it was good to watch. Like, they were on their game, and they were extremely proficient in that art. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they all did really well.
Yeah, it's very impressive. I think it's archery in itself is a very hard task. I think, like, it's a lot of variables, and it does make it hard, especially the more accurate you want to be. Obviously, like, if you want to go and shoot your 10 rings all day long, it's going to be a lot harder than if you're just saying whatever, I can hit it in the hands. But it's like, when you actually start to want to be really accurate and you want your kills to be really spot on, if you then put it on a struggle stick, it makes it a whole new level. And I really think that's somewhere I want to go to eventually, but it might be when my girls are a little bit older and I've got a bit more time, maybe.
Yeah. And you're right. You see a lot of guys, that have been shooting for a while. They've been successful in hunting, and then they just go, I want to go to that next stage of the challenge. You know what I mean? And then there's other guys that just go, nah, I don't like all the contraption. I'm just going down that road, and they work with it, and they're good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of good guys out there that actually, are pretty good with the bows. But they need to all it's not as easy, like you said, when, you know, our life's so busy nowadays, to put the effort into have your muscle memory for a recurve as compared to a bow. Like if someone says, I'm shooting a 70-pound bow and I've got a 43-pound long bow here, and I'll shoot that for maybe 10 shots to 15 shots and I'll make it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Whereas I shoot a 70-pound bow, I can shoot that, you know, do a whole session with it and, oh yeah, whatever, walk inside. You know what I mean? Just horses for courses. They're different beasts.
Definitely. Yeah, that let off that they have makes it a lot easier, that's for sure.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
Something that that I did recently was replace my strings, as I said before. And when I first got to you, you said next time you get some new strings, make sure you don't go multicolored, because I've gone Hunter's orange and a Kiwi green, I think. And the big point that you kind of the big thing that you pointed out to me is essentially when you dye, like the strings don't come that color, so you have to dye them. Each dye has a different chemical to it, which means that the stretchiness of the string is going to be very different in each one. It might not be heaps, but it's going to be enough to make that string potentially very different within those threads.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when you look at, you're talking about, so if you've got dyes and waxes, that's the difference, right? In each different colors. So blacks and I believe orange is one of the worst for, like, when I say is worst, it's just got the most waxes and most dyes in it to get to that
processed
stage. Yeah, they're processed, you know what I mean? So you can have those, but for making, you think about it logically as far as, okay, the first thing I'll say to people is have a look at all the pros, right? Have a look at the Levi's, the Dan McCarthy's, the Chance Bobaths and all those guys. They don't have multicolored strings.
Yeah.
And the reason for it is when you're making a bowstring, you have the one spool in your hand, you start making that. It's made off the same spool. It's going to have the same dyes, the same waxes on that. So it's going to work together the best, you know, in all different environments. So if they're in a cold environment or in a hot environment, it's not going to manipulate as much as one that has 2 or 3 colors, because obviously one might manipulate slightly and that might give you a little bit of peak rotation or a bit of timing issues or something like that, you know. So I've been a big fan of that, and that's when you're like, because I'm a gas sort of person, I've been installing their strings for ever since they've been in Australia, and they've gone with Jesse Broadwater, the freak show ones. So that what Jesse's all about is basically his strings don't even have much wax at all, if at all. Right. Yeah. So the reason for that, he believes that that's where the main stability is for his shooting and stuff like that. You know, he doesn't care if his particular string's got a little bit of fluff on it or anything like that, as long as it's stable from when he's practicing at his home, flies somewhere, drives somewhere, or whatever, comes back out and it's still hitting behind the pin. That to him is the most important, where you see other people that, you know, and they listen, it's what I'm just saying is it's one of those 1%. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A good string builder, a good string, it's you're still going to get a good string out of it, but it's just that time where, you know, people might sit back now and think and go, yeah, you're right. You know, I was at New South Wales. I was on the coast in New South Wales, and I went out west to, you know, the middle of frigging Tibooburra or whatever. I went out to Darwin or Cape York, and it was, you know, 20 degrees or 25 degrees on the coast, and it went up to 35, 36, and my peep's gone from sitting perfect to quarter off.
Yeah.
And that's all we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense to me. I mean, when I was running a nutrition company, we used to say it's the same sort of concept, but you think about processed food, like you eat a banana versus banana bread, like one's going to be a lot more nutritiously dense for you, and have a fair few more micronutrients than the other version. And it's exactly the same kind of process or concept.
Yep. And if like I said, if everything you look at, what you do on your bow and how you shoot your bow, whatever it may be, right, stabilization, peep height, peep color, you know, the nose button, D-loop, draw length, you know, all these things, if you have to sit back and you look at it at one individual item each time you're doing training and all that stuff, you will become a better archer if you start to know the game. You know what I mean? Like everything that you can look at and whatever you think you've done, I'll still go back and look at stuff. I'm super lucky, you know. I'm like I said, I'm around people that I class as really good friends in the 3D and the hunting side of things. And in the 3D side of things, I love that so much because of the simple fact is that my competitor, I can ask them a question, or we can be shooting together where we're trying to beat each other, but we can also have a beer and we can talk about what they're doing with their arrows, or have you tried this, or have you tried that? And that's what I love about that type of sport.
Definitely.
And you know, it's just, to me, it's just like there's been heaps of times, you know, where you're sitting there and someone says something and you pick up on your ears and you turn around and you go, what did you just say? You know, and then next minute you go, and then you think about it for a bit and you go, I bet you $10 that's what I've been doing for a while. Rightio, when I go back from here, I'll come out and I'll try this and I'll try that. And you're like, you know, that just fixed something that I've been wondering how to fix. You know?
And that is funny, right? It's like little cues, and those little things can just make such a big difference. It's something that actually happened when I was in person with you. You gave me some stuff to go and work on, some homework of shooting from a 1.5 meters. And I said, look, something that does keep happening is that because I'm trying to relax, I relax too much, and every once in a while the bow is pulling back on me. And you're like, oh, mate, that's just this. Just push your chest through and you're sweet. And I was like, of course, like, it's so simple. But just that little cue and having that little understanding from someone else is just like of course, like why would you not do it that way? And it just transitioned the way that I was shooting straight away.
Yeah, and I'm a massive advocate for that. It's like some people call it blank barrel shooting. I actually don't call it that. I call it finding your shot, because normally if I'm talking to you about doing that, you haven't found your shot, right? There's something lacking that's not 100%. You will still be a very good archer, a very good shot going forward in your normal day, but the old gremlin will kick in. TP, I call it that. It's target panic, and I call it TP. You wipe your ass with it. Don't talk about it, because if you keep putting, this is what I say to clients, and that if you keep putting it out there, what do you do when you're trying to remember something? You say it out aloud. You say it 3 times. You say it like that, so it sticks into your head. So you've just put it up to the top. So don't talk about it. Like I say to people, I go, instead of calling it that, call it TP. And if you don't want to call it that, say you're having execution problems. Right? That's all it is. All right, because if you're doing that, it's going to relax your brain. It's not going to give you that anxiety that you're having to execute a shot or to hold the pin on the middle. And that's what, for me, the biggest thing is people have wants and needs. If we all want to put the arrow in the middle, right? That's just human nature. Yeah. Right. And when you do that, and you've put the arrow in the middle, you don't understand how you did that the first time. So then you really knock an arrow. Like subconsciously, I'm saying this, you will knock an arrow because you're excited because you just got one in the middle. And then you'll knock the arrow, you'll shoot it again. It'll be high, low, left and right, because not 9 times out of 10, it will be high because someone's dropping the pin down into the target. And as they're doing it, I'll go get them that most people use these days, you know, the trigger. They'll punch it. And then they'll go, oh, shit, you know, and then they'll get frustrated. They'll carry on and they'll do whatever. So hence, if someone's coming to me and they've got execution issues, I will put them at 1.5 meters, because what you're doing is they're not getting that visual return from a shit shot, right? So when they do a really good shot, you're going to have endorphins released. You're going to go, shit, Edwards archery and all that. But if you take that away and you bring it back to a simple step of shooting close at your height, I'm not aiming down at the ground, at your height, shooting close, because then you're taking away the anxiety of losing arrows, anxiety of missing the target, anxiety of not doing well. And then all you're worrying about is how your grip is, how your stance is, how your anchor point is, how the P-pight's getting addressed, how your nose is sitting on the string, how the shot's going. Have I got tension in my front hand, my forearm, my backhand on the release hand, my forearm? Have I got isolating all the right muscles to allow my pin to float nice and slowly and then execute the shot when I've got the green light to do that? And it takes it away. And like, it takes 21 days to reboot the computer, 21 days of positive practice. And I always say to people, everyone's busy, but I want someone to do 20 arrows a night, and they can do it in the morning, they can do it in the afternoon, whatever. But just concentrate and make sure that every arrow that you're putting onto the string, that you're thinking about it. You're not thinking of, I just need to practice because Ian told me to.
Yeah.
You're practicing because you're looking at where your feet are. You've drawn, if it's in your garage or wherever you're doing it, you've put markers on the ground where you're going, well, this is where the stance is today. I'll keep changing it and see how it feels for the execution of the shot, how I address the target, little things like that. You know what I mean? And then you go through it. How's my front grip? Is it relaxed? Have I got medium rear in the palm? Have I once I've gone back, pushed your shoulders down and back? Have I pushed my chest out to isolate it into the back muscles? And then have I relaxed my forearm? Have I relaxed the palm of my hand with the release aids in? And then, okay, all of that's done. The peeps aligned, the sights on the target. Okay, green light. I can start pulling with my elbow and start executing the shot, whether it be whatever release aid you've got, and then the shot will break. You'll see whether you've done a good job by how the bow reacts. If the bow reacts kicking to the left or kicking to the right, depending on which way you're shooting, you've got tension in your front hand. You haven't done your job. You know what I mean? You've got still tension in your forearm. Your shoulders probably not aligned, and if you're jumping on the trigger, you just got to relax. And then after you do that for a few times, when it's at 1.5 meters, you'll really get into it where you'll say, okay, I'm working this out. I can feel what a good shot feels like. And then you do that for 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden you go, you know what? I'm going to put something up on there and I'm going to put a little 10-cent piece on there. And I'm actually going to start aiming, because that means that now you're allowing the brain to start to kick into gear, where you're putting a little pin there and you need to start holding it there. Do exactly the same you've been doing for the last few weeks, and then still do the same thing and execute the shot. Once you can do that and you can get through it, you go, right, let's go outside. Let's start shooting at 20 meters. And you'll watch your groups change. Because you've found a shot sequence. You've gone through the process. You're not worried about, the 1.5 meters to the 20 meters, because the arrow doesn't know how far it's going to fly once it's get kicked out of the bow. The bow doesn't know how far it's throwing the arrow. The only thing that's throwing it is your head, you, the person. So if you get past that mental anguish of doing that, you'll be a better archer.
Yeah, it was really interesting to kind of go through it. I honestly, I didn't think I was a bad shot. I thought I had a good process down in general. But all it did was it systematized it a lot more and made it more efficient and effective compared to what I was doing. And it's funny because within adding more to my process, I now, like you said, I've relaxed everything else because of it. But by what I was getting at is by adding more to my process, I've now got a proper sequence that I go through from start to finish, including like words that I'm saying in my head every single shot that I take. And it's funny, I was doing some practice shots. I've been practicing at 40 meters every day now because I completed my homework successfully. I gotta admit, I gotta admit, there was a few days I only did 5 arrows just because it just
life's like that, mate. But if they're 5 good ones, you've done it.
And that's what I aim for every time. And it's funny, shooting at 40 meters, if I let my brain travel away from my little mantra that I've been saying to myself, that's when shit goes square. And so it's like all for me now, I know that in the process of when there's a deer, no matter what distance it's at, if it's in front of me and I'm going through my process, I'm just saying my mantra. I'm going through the thing that I've practiced nonstop for the last essentially 30 or probably even 40 days now. And when I do those shots at 40 meters, I'm getting those groups that I was getting at 20 meters before. So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and that's right. And it's not that hard, is it? You know what I mean? If you're doing the process and you understand, like you're just saying, if it's not right, you'll just go straight away. The arrow's probably still in the air and you go, duh.
You know it every time. You're like, duh, damn it.
Yeah, that's right. But then you just look at it and you go, okay, that one got away. Don't procrastinate on the shit shots. And that's what human nature does it all the time, where you do a shit shot and you sit there and have a bottom lip on the concrete and, you drag, getting burrs in it and that. And then, but if you just look at it and go, well, that wasn't the best shot I've done today. But if you do a good shot, they're the ones that you need to celebrate. You need to look at them and go, geez, that felt good. Bloody hell, I'm getting progress here,
Yeah, definitely. No, it's been a very insightful process. Like I said, I didn't think I was shooting bad, and now I just know that I'm shooting better, which is great. It gives me a lot more confidence.
And I'd like to talk to you in 6 months' time too, because I reckon
definitely
it'll be even better again. You know what I mean? Like, we will still be talking now that I'm in Brisbane, but yeah, it's a process, and I think the journey is only just begun, and then but you'll be starting to come, because you are a good shot. You know what I mean? And it's not hard. I'm just sharpening the pencil on with you.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's funny because I thought I was going through a back tension shot with my trigger release because I've got a back tension release, and that's actually a question I had for you. Do you see that when people get a back tension release, if it fixes their target panic, is it actually fixing the problem? Is it fixing their shooting, or is it just fixing it by putting a band-aid over it?
No, it's a lot of times when people are having execution issues, it's basically they're not looking at the whole shot process. Like I said, they're not breaking it down to they're wanting to get the result. They're not looking at how to get the result. All right. Yes. So what's happening is the little trigger release has caught them by the short and curlies, and it's saying as the pin's coming down, you're not putting the pin on the mark where you're supposed to, and it's going, don't worry, mate, I've got it. You know, you stand back, I've got this, and pow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas
trying to control it too much.
Yeah, and then so when they change to a resistance or a back or a hinge or something like that, they got to relearn that computer, right? So then they're losing a lot of their bad habits because they've just changed it.
Yeah,
but it's still underlying there. But what it does is if they keep working with changing different release aids, ultimately at the end of the day, what's changing is they're allowing the pin to sit in the middle and execute a shot. And that's where I say going back to 1.5 meters. And when you starting to learn the shot and you're doing it, you're learning that the bow's not going to, bite back unless horribly you haven't put an arrow in it. You know what I mean? It blows up on you. But on a normal situation, it's not going to be. But that's the biggest thing where a lot of people just need to break down archery. And like I say to her, it's pretty freaking simple. We just got to put an arrow on the string. You got to draw back, and your job as the archer is just to hold the pin in the middle and go through the whole process. That what we teach and all that sort of stuff is just hold it in the middle and execute the shot. The bow doesn't know what it has to do, and the arrow doesn't know how far it's got to go. So if you're doing your thing, it's going to be behind the pin. You know what I mean? But what the problem is going back to endorphins and wanting to win, wanting to get trophies, wanting to get big things.
The egos that comes with it, exactly.
Boom. That's why women are so much easier to train than guys, because women don't care about poundage. They don't care about any of that. And if you speak to them and you say, try this, try that, and try that, they'll just go, yep. And then that's how simple it is. Honestly, it's simple.
Yeah, it's funny. I was a CrossFit coach for years, and it was the same in the gyms. You'd find the exact same. Like there was every once in a while you'd have a lady you'd have issues with that they wouldn't really want to listen, but most of the time they were 100% all for it. Make me better, coach. Arms up, go. And then 100%. You had to figure out what daddy issues they had, what their background has been, where their trauma's at, and how you had to work around it to be able to get through to them to make it make sense. It was pretty interesting.
and that is half the battle, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, what are you dealing with when you're walking through the door? What do we got here?
Definitely, mate. It's pretty interesting. I had a hinge release I was using for quite a while. I've actually lent it to the crew at Dog and Gun right now, but with it has the half moon.
Lost now, mate.
Probably. I'll keep tabs on them, but we'll see. But yeah, so it's got the half moon as the hinge, but as you get to one point, it makes a click. There's a line on the half moon, and every time I'd get to the click, it would make me jump. I'd be like, whoa, and go all over the place. And so I really didn't use it that much. But when I went in one day, Tommy's like, oh, mate, I'll just flick it around for you. So I didn't realize you could do that. So I'm excited to get it back eventually from them, and I'll give it another shot.
Look, the biggest thing is I use no click for hunting because I've been hunting with a hinge for 15, 18 years. That's just what I use, and I use it in target as well. And for target, I actually have a hinge. I mean, a click, I should say. Yeah. And the reason for that is we shoot a lot of up and down hills. And so when I draw back, I want to be able to get to that click and know that I'm just on the edge of go get them, you know what I mean? Yeah. And know that downhill or uphill's the same, whereas without shooting the click, sometimes you can be pulling in and be a little bit apprehensive, and it takes a little bit longer to execute that shot, that's where I went down that line. But what I can say with that is when you're shooting the click, I have seen what you're saying, where you just about throw the thing. The biggest thing I can possibly say to you is as soon as you draw back and you get onto the target, is rotate it and click it straight away before it's actually you're bedded into your click. So therefore, and then you're not doing any movement with your hand or anything like that. You're just being static, and then you're checking all your peep sight and your sight and your pin onto the target, and then you go, okay, I got the green light, and then you start pulling with your elbow and start rotating the fingers, and that's how that shot execute. Because if you sit there, because what a lot of people do with those type of release aids, I see it all the time. Same as with the index finger ones, where I call them go-get-ems, and but you see the people where they'll draw back, they'll sit there, they'll move their heads up and down, wink it left and right for 5 or 6 seconds with their fingers behind the trigger, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, everything's good. Then they've got to bring their finger around on top. Yeah, and then either do what you just said, do the old drive-by, or then they start the whole process again to check everything. So basically they're doing 2 shots.
Yeah.
So like I train with people, as soon as you get back, your pin's onto the target, you're addressing the target straight away, your finger comes around. And the biggest problem I see with index triggers is everyone has a hair trigger, like you literally blow on them and they'll go, and it's the worst possible thing you can do. Yeah. All right. I hate, and a lot of shops are going to hate me that, but I hate the spot hog ones. I refuse to sell anyone them. I really don't like them. Because you just can't get them tight enough, and that causes TP issues because people don't want to put their finger on it because it's so hair trigger, and they're apprehensive with going through a shot process. You need to get your release aid where you can actually put your finger onto it, put pressure on it, and sit there and do nothing, and then you go, and it's called load and release. And then you go through your process, and then when you start activating that release aid, the shot breaks, and it breaks well, and you're doing a really good shot. You got to earn your shot. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Those ones, people, you just see them come in there, and their fingers normally 4 or 5 mil off it, and then when they go to do the shot, here we come, let's go, drive by.
And you were saying that about a lot of the professional 3D shooters as well, like the ones who are at the big shows, earning the big dollars, like essentially the best dollars you can within archery. They all have a very heavy back wall, and they have to work hard to pull through it, right? They'll have a lighter poundage bow, and they'll really jack up their back wall.
Yeah, so if it's in feeder and all that, so you got the Rio Wilds and all that, they're all out in a 50 metre. They're shooting 50 metres, so it doesn't matter about the arc of the arrow, the speed, or anything like that. They're just all about getting the thin arrows and stability with their bow and all that stuff. So they're capped at 60 pound peak weight. And what most of those guys will be holding at their full draw in their valley is anywhere from 17 to 23, 24 pound, right? And that the reason for that is because of the leverage that they can gain from their holding weight to how much weight they can have on their stabilisers. Okay, so with like the Rio Wilds and doing the feeder and all that stuff, you'll have a look at how much weight they've got on the front. Like I can't remember. I think Rio's got like 20-something ounces out the front, and whatever he's got out the back. It's phenomenal, right? Yeah. And you and I would pull the bow back and probably shoot it twice and go, fuck that, because it's not comfortable.
Just tired.
Yeah. But he trains, he's a professional archer, he's unreal and all that. But he's got that. So on the windy conditions, because when they're shooting out like that, it's windy. You're in a paddock, so they're trying to slow all the movement down, and that's how they do it. You're talking about like then you go in the 3D archers and all that stuff, and you're talking to like Levi Morgan did a podcast where one competition he was at 21 pound or 20 and a half pound, and he wasn't shooting. He was complaining about his sight picture and all that, and he went back to an old bow that he'd shot years ago and thought like that bow he just couldn't miss with, put it on the draw board, and it was 19.2 or something pounds. So he ginned around with the brand new bow he had, dropped it down to that, and then boom, he's got the mojo back. You know what I mean? And it's those things where those guys I think Tim Gillingham's at 21, 22 pound, and those guys. But you have a look at Tim's setup. I love Tim. I reckon he's the most amazing archer, and he's the nutty professor where he does heaps of shit where you just scratch your head, but really good bloke to talk to and all that sort of stuff. And he's one guy, if you're ever looking at following someone and what they do, Tim's good. He's got a really good series on tuning arrows, tuning bows and all that with Gold Tip on YouTube. If you go on the Gold Tip page, I think it's like an 11 or 13 videos where if you're not a better archer after looking at all them from him, like there's not much help for you. But you know what I mean? So
yeah.
But it's all about that what I say with people when they come to me with setting up stabilizers and all that stuff, it's that leverage point. It's that counter lever, like, so my sort of the one when I talk to people, it's like a crane. So if you've got a 30-ton crane, a mobile crane, when the jib is straight up in air and you're lifting something right at the back of the base of where the weight is, it can lift 30 ton or whatever it is,
Yeah.
When that jib's right out as far as it possibly can, it can only probably lift 200 kilos. So you think about that as a stabilizer. If your stabilizer is close to the riser, a short stabilizer, 8-10 inches or something, you're going to have more mass weight on that bow for that bow to react better, or what you're looking for, as compared to having a 30-inch rod out the front with 3 or 4 ounces on the front. It's going to react way better because you're putting the weight right out the front. It's that counter lever. And then what I also say is I work it out from poundage, draw length, and holding weight will give you a stabilizer length, right? So this is just an argument's sake. Say you're 27-inch or something like that. I'd say I'd look at a 20-inch front bar. If it's a 3D bow right now, we're talking about a 20-inch front bar and a 10 or 12-inch at the back. Probably a 10, to be honest. Maybe even an 8 to be that. Then if you go to 28, 29, what I am, I'm shooting a 30-inch rod out the front, and I actually shoot V-bars, and I shoot 2 15-inch V-bars out the back, right? And then if you're going over 30-inch, you'd go to 33-inch front rod, and you'd be the 15 out the back. But I'm only got, with my V-bar system, I've got 4 ounces at the front, I've got 8 ounces on the left-hand side, and I've got 7 ounces on the right-hand side, and I've got them pumped down the bottom, and the bow just aims really good. And how I've set that up is I can draw that bow back with my toes aiming downhill and my toes aiming uphill. And when I open my eyes, if I draw the bow back close and I open my eyes, that bubble's sitting in the middle. That's how I've set it up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then if you're doing a hunting bow, for me personally, what I've been doing for a while is I've got a 15-inch front bar, and it's only got 4 ounces as well. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Is I have a side quiver. I've got a tight spot 2.0, like a 2-piece quiver.
Yeah.
And I like to have it when I'm walking. Like, it's a long stabilizer, it's light, so the physical weight of the bow is not adding to it. Definitely. And then also, if I throw it up on a long walk, I can throw it up on my backpack and I can hold the stabilizer out the front, and I'm not like losing circulation in my arm by bending my arm back because I've got a short stabilizer and a heavy stabilizer. And that's why personally I've done it, and the bow obviously aims good. And I also am an advocate of the 10-degree offset for the quick disconnect on the front of the bows. So if you want to pull them out to put them in your bow case or in a car or anything like that, you just twist them and it pulls it off really quickly. But with that 10-degree offset, when I'm setting up my stabilizer, I've actually tightened it up on the bow. So my stabilizer isn't sitting down the front of the riser, it's actually cocked off to the left.
Yeah, okay.
The reason for that is it's probably 60 mil out of plumb, but I'm counteracting the arrows in the quiver.
Yeah.
So once again, my grip's good, the bubble's sitting good, and I'm not having to manipulate my hand because I've got 5 arrows in my quiver on the right-hand side of the bow. I've put the weight out to the left to do that, Yeah,
that's interesting. So what's your concept, or what's your thoughts on like a quiverizer, for instance, then?
Love them. Yeah, they're really good. Excellent idea. So I was actually lucky to have the very first quiverizer in Australia.
No way. There you go.
Yeah. So, and when I say that, is the guy I used to live with, Grant Hughes, Montana, who's been on one of the videos with Brad Smith hunting bantang. And he went over and become the GM for Option Archery with Dan Evans and that. And when I was over, so when obviously Dan and Montana are really good mates, and they'd been hunting a lot, he sent over a prototype.
There you go.
And we were shooting the prototype. But I'm sponsored by Bee Stinger, so that's why I personally don't shoot them, but I think that they're a fantastic idea.
No, I really liked mine, the Edition. The one thing that I've found is messing with my whole setup right now is I bought one of the Bowmag camera fittings for your phone.
And it rattles?
It rattles. It's just where I've got it situated right now. is on the same side that the quiverizer is on. So it's adding extra weight to that side. But more so what's actually problematic is the way that my phone is sitting is it's blocking some of the arrows. And by nature, the first arrow I pick is the highest arrow in my quiverizer, which is the one arrow that's definitely getting knocked by or blocked by the phone every time. So I need to spin the bow mag to the opposite side. So therefore it's counterbalancing the weight of the arrows firstly, but then secondly, it won't ever be a problem of knocking it on the way out. I just haven't got there yet.
And that's not going to be a problem when you're doing the video on, because don't you have to put the camera, is it vertical or horizontal?
No, so I'm doing all vertical.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so maybe that's the fix. Maybe I just go to horizontal, then it will be much easier. It'll be a smoother process because it'll all be in the middle then.
Yeah.
Right, rather than it being the vertical film that I'm doing right now is off to the side.
And I've seen up there because there was a few of them come through up there at Cayuga. There was actually a lot of them, and a couple of the guys had them up higher. I don't know how they mounted them. I wasn't watching, so maybe they mounted them near their sight, in the sight hole or something. I'm not too sure.
Because all it is just an L bracket, right? So if you can bolt it in somewhere else. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, interesting. I'll play around with it and give some updates, and hopefully you'll see a big red stag being shot through it.
How sweet's that?
Exactly.
The biggest thing I've seen with all the guys using them, though, is they shoot and then they drop their bow arm down to grab another arrow out instead of just keeping the film going, you know what I mean? So that's something that everyone needs to learn, eh? Just keep it rolling, people.
So something I actually wanted to ask you is, being that you've been in the industry for so long, you've seen so much and you're still in and amongst it so much, is there things that you really just you hate about the industry? Is there things that you see and you're like, that's just bullshit, like products that people try to sell or anything down that route?
Yeah, probably the most frustrating thing, it's not so much hate because I don't want to say those words, but
it's a strong word.
The most frustrating thing, I suppose, is a guy with a fairy name in his name. Just some of that. It's the misinformation. And when I say that, all information is worthwhile and you have to filter it. But what I'm saying is a lot of his stuff is agenda-based. You know what I mean? Like he's getting money from ethics archery, he's getting money from tough heads, he's getting money from a lot of those things, right? And then he gets all these people in there to back up his scenarios. But the way I try and explain it to heaps of people, one arrow, as they sort of say, whether it be a 650 or a 700 or 750 arrow, they're just throwing it blanketly down, saying that that's what you need to be able to harvest an animal ethically. And I really, honestly, it fucking shits me, because it's not, as I've always preached with everyone that I sort of do is, once again, is draw length, is poundage, and there'll be an arrow weight that is going to be the most efficient for that bow and will give you the best out of that for yourself, right? So once again, the word forgiving comes into it, whereas they're just pushing, if you don't have an adult arrow, as they call it, and a 300-grain broadhead up the front, you're doing it wrong, right? Yeah. And I disagree. And what I've said to many of people here in Australia, I go, you got to remember these guys only hunt for, I don't know, it depends on how rich they are, I suppose, and how many days they're in the bush. But let's just say it's 2 weeks they're hunting.
6 weeks max, right? That's what they can do. Yeah.
That's right, and then you've got a guy that's shooting pigs underneath a feeder at 20 yards and he's telling us what we should be doing and shouldn't be doing and hitting bone and all that stuff. And I'm like, I'd rather be taking my advice from the guys that we have in Australia that can hunt 365 days a year, the Brad Smiths, the Matty Moores that can hunt up there. You've got, the Casey McCullums, you've got Robbie Austin guys, you've got the McCulloch boys, you've got Green Trees and all these other guys that can hunt all the time and they go out and kill. I guarantee you a pub feed that none of them are shooting a 650 grain arrow.
Yeah.
Right? So why would I be wanting to listen to a Muppet over there and thinking it's a holy grail? So my way of doing it, what I've done, we did one time, it was Shannon Postel and myself. I'm lucky, I've got a chronograph, I've got shitloads of arrows, and gold tip arrows you can actually manipulate with 10 grains, 20 grains, and 50 grains, you've got a tool that goes up. It's called the FAC system, and you can adjust your FOC and your weight forward by just screwing in a little. They've got a big log Allen key as a tool.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and you can just play with stuff like that. So obviously within the spine of your using that arrow before you put too much weight up the front. And that's what a lot of these people, they're not showing that time of the tuning process. So it's all coming from the Ashby. And don't get me wrong, I like Ashby. I reckon a lot of the stuff he's done a lot for archery. He's done a lot for everyone over there. He's the one that got bow hunting legalized in Africa. So we all owe him something for allowing that. But a lot of his findings are about traditional arrows, right? And they're about finding the spine of that arrow, breaking it down so it goes around the riser, right? So with going back to recurves and you shooting fingers and all that stuff. So with the spine of an arrow, it could be starting out stiff, and how you break that spine down is by adding weight at the front, and then it'll bend around that riser. You'll get good arrow flight, and it was obviously how they push it all, right? Well, we're using modern day bows now, and the bows that when he was doing all his finding of 15, 20 years ago, and I think, I'm not even sure whether it was 81 or 82 when he started, or whether it was 87 or 88, something around those times. So the bows are 20 times more efficient now.
Definitely, very change beast.
Yeah, they're just doing that. So going back over that, they're pushing an agenda, and it's going to work. There's no two ways about it. It's going to work. It's going to, if that, but it's not efficient, in my opinion. It's not efficient, and it's not forgiving.
So get back to what you and Shannon did with the...
So what we did one day was got all these arrows, right? Shot them through paper, shot them through the chrono, right? Put the weight on the paper, like next to the paper tuner, wrote down that, did all the kinetic energy, the momentum, wrote everything down, went from about 440 grains with my bow. So I shoot 73-pound Realm X, shoots 29-inch, and went from about 430, 440, I think was the lowest, and we went up to about a 600 grain arrow. And we just shot them all the way through and did all the speed, did all that, and come down to about 3 or 4 arrows where it was in the mid-80s of foot-pound kinetic energy, high 6s to early 7s, which is a pretty friggin', thing. But there would have been 30 to 40 feet a second difference between one arrow to the other arrow. So what I did was, I'm lucky enough to have 3D targets at home, and what I did was, I know at 30 metres I can hit a tennis ball, so I'll just went there, we put some electrical tape across where the heart and lung line was horizontally, and I'd have a slider on my bow, and I'd just set up the 4 arrows, so it was, and then I'd shoot it. So I'd dial it so it was hitting that line at 30, and then I wouldn't touch the sight, but I'd reshoot that arrow, and I'd move back to 31 metres. Then I wouldn't touch the sight, reshoot it, go back. And with the heavy arrows, I wouldn't even get past 31 metres, and I was missing the arrow, missing the animal.
Target.
Right?
Which is like a 30 centimetres or more drop, right?
That's right.
Like
so then
40 or 50, really.
That's right. So then when I'm going with that, so my arrow for 29 inch and 73 pound was 485 grains, was the honey hole, right? That was like the most efficient. I was in the mid, I think it was 270.
Like you said before, right?
Yeah, 278 feet a second. I was like 86 or 87 foot-pound kinetic energy, and it was like 0.69 or something like that, and then, but it means that I could shoot to 33.5 meters and still hit the bottom of the heart, right? So that's going back. That's not going forward as well. So say it was closer, I was still hitting that area moving up forward. So I'm probably gaining 5 meters of forgiveness for that setup. The bow was quiet. The bow was shooting under that 280. I like to shoot bows under 280 for hunting, because I think that's the harmonic balance with how they work the most efficiency personally. Like I can shoot bows. I think the fastest one was doing 306, what we did on that day. But you could feel it in the bow. It had a twang. It was definitely noisier. And I wasn't really gaining. I think I was losing a little bit in the kinetic energy and the momentum, because it was obviously going there. But it was we're all talking about 4.
It's like 20 feet per second is not that much over 30 meters, is it?
Oh, no, it's not, but it's more the noise, you know what I mean? And I'd rather have that bow where, you know, a little bit of wind could be happening. And if that bow's cracking a little bit, it's not normal. You know what I mean? So I'd rather have that nice bow where it just feels good in your hand. You're not pissed off to shoot it. You know what I mean? Just to, you know, feel like you walk into the room and say, oh, my bow's doing 300 whatever. You know what I mean? So.
And so what is kind of like the actual maths essentially to it? Is there anything that people can do if they don't have a chronograph to go and measure out what?
Yeah, so what I've basically come to is, like, you look at it. So I'm 29 and shooting that 485 to 500 is a really good one. If you go to 30 inch, you go to that 520 to 530, 540 sort of thing. 31, you go up a bit. And you got to remember, each time someone goes longer in their draw length, they're going to be limited on the arrows they use, because they've got to have a stiffer arrow, because obviously the arrow's going to be bending, flexing more. So the arrow weight is going to go up. So, you know, you got guys that are shooting 31 inch, 31 and a half, and their arrows are going to be up near that 570, 580. And that's pretty much where they've got to be at. You know what I mean? Like, for them to shoot a 650 grain arrow, they're really sort of probably losing a little bit than what they should be, especially at that, even though they've got a long draw length, and they're gaining poundage, or they're gaining the arrow on the string longer. They're sort of losing it. And the same as when you go down to 28, I'd drop that down to 460. When they're 27, 440, you know, and then you obviously going down to when you're short. And, you know, there's no use shooting. We did one with Kimmy Guest, you know what I mean? Like, not too sure anyone's noticed her. Kimmy's a gorgeous girl, and she shoots with Cayuga, and she's 23 and a half inch draw. And when she come to me once to tune her bow, she had her bow at 42 pound, and she had like a 440 grain arrow, 450 grain arrow. And the first thing I said was, the arrow is way too heavy for you. You know, like, it's just not efficient for this bow, because it was a Bowtech. I just can't remember the model, but it was like a 6-inch brace side, a 6.5 inch brace side, and she was 23 inch draw. So arrow's not sitting on the bow too long, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I tuned her bow, we sorted it out, and I had a 400 spine pierce. That was the lowest I had in the shop at that stage. And then we got her arrow down to like 350 grains, 351 or something like Big that.
Difference. Yeah.
Yeah, massive difference. And she couldn't believe how well the bow shot. Then they obviously did that. She went out and harvested a beautiful fellow buck at 27 yards, and arrow went completely through. See you later. And it was like, how good's that? And then I think it was last year, I lose track with all the time with COVID and stuff on there, but I think it was last year she went up and hunted buff with her other half, Yvonne, you know. And so she pushed herself to 48 pound, and she used a 150 Zot on the front, which is a really sort of good, efficient broadhead. And her arrow was 381 grains at 48 pound, and she was burying them at 20 metres broadside to the Fletchers.
Yeah, wow.
You know what I mean? So it's efficient for that. You know, it's like, and that's where you sort of go back to what their agenda is. If you do all the maths and you look at it and you go, okay, I can shoot a 485 grain arrow, no problems. I can also shoot a 550 grain arrow, no problems. Nothing's stopping me, but it's not forgiving for me, because you think about a situation that you're out there hunting.
I've got one I can share if you want. I was actually out one day, and we were hunting some reds, and some red hinds ran out in front of us. Essentially, my mate went down and walked through this creek, and they ran out in front of me, and they were worried about him, but not worried about me. And I was like, boom, they're 40 meters away from me, straight there in front of me. I quickly ranged them. I pulled back, took my shot, went just underneath her. It was literally, everything was perfect, and then it just sunk underneath her chest. It was that heartbreaking moment, literally at the very end of a hunt. I re-ranged it as soon as she ran off, and I got 43 meters, I think it was, or 42 meters, and that was it. We're done, just because of that one little difference. And so it was a very heartbreaking moment. But I think also, obviously, the further the distance you start to take as a shot, and I was very confident with that shot at that time. And had she been at 40 meters, it would have been a dead deer. But yeah, it just shows, right?
100%. And And it's once again, everything I try and do with everything we do, the little small things, it's about being forgiving, because how many times do you see it where people put the rangefinder up, by the time they put their rangefinder back into their pocket, by the time they put their release aid onto their D-loop, then they look back up and that animal could have made 1 or 2 steps like you're talking about, and you still think you're doing the right shot. Well, it's if you're shooting that heavier side because you think of it, you know what I mean? And so, it's just, I don't know, it's something where I've thought about it, I've gone through it all, and I can talk to people about it and say, you can go down that journey of doing the 700 grain arrows, but you'll be back and you'll just be wasting time and money.
I remember hearing a story of Cameron Haynes. He was saying how he came over with a very heavy arrow to Australia and started hunting. And he said that he watched the deer like move out of the way, pretty much walk out of the way when he'd take his shot, and his arrow was just way too slow for the animals that we have here, for the critters that we have here, which is crazy because you think about what they've got in America and it's not that different really. You'd think it'd be just as skittish, but yeah, he essentially got here, took some shots, changed his whole setup, went a lot lighter, and then started being successful.
Yeah, well, I just look at it from when it was all starting to prick my interest with seeing that. I actually asked all the guys that shoot with Cayuga. We've got a group chat, and I just put it on there, and I said, what arrow shoot? What are you shooting at the moment?
Hence why you're willing to bet a pub feed, hey? Because you know the answers.
Boom. Hey, old bull, mate, old bull. So when you were looking at it, and like I said, like the class people that are shooting this sort of stuff, and I said, the FOC and your weight of your arrow, what are we sure shooting at the moment? And the light, so I've shot for 20-something years, and I had to go and look up FOC because we just didn't care about that shit back in the old days. You had to make out wooden arrows, and then you went to aluminium arrows, and then you know whatever heads you're using and all that sort of stuff. And at the time, and so it was just like I said, what you could afford at the time, the Ribtex, the black stumps, and whatever they came out, you'd up them, you know. And so I looked it up, and mine was 13.5% FOC, 485 grain arrow, and the lowest that was in the group was 11%, and the highest was 16 at that time, right? And so I've got some arrows here which are called airstrikes. So they're a 204, the 5 mil, and they're only 8-point-something grains, 8.3 grains, 8.4. And what I tried with them is I put some stainless steel inserts in them, and those arrows still weigh 485 grains, but they're a 19% FOC. I just wanted to see so I could, you know, have a conversation with someone and say, yeah, it's better or it's worse. You know what I mean? And at this stage, at 50 meters, I reckon you can slowly get a better group with 19% FOC in windy conditions. But as far as penetration and all that stuff, I haven't seen any difference. Honestly, I haven't seen any difference, because the 485 with the 13.5% with a good broadhead, well-tuned bow, you're still going through the animal. Is it sticking in the dirt 8 inches or is it sticking in the dirt 10 inches? I don't know. You know, it's done its job. It's gone through the animal.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I
was actually just having a look. So in regards to my setup and what I've done, so my weight is around the 585, I believe. So 30-inch draw. And I'm about 585. I was just looking at Bowhunter's Domain website right now, which is the shafts I use. So I use the 250s, and then I've got the heavier inserts, which is the 55 grains, which is their half sets. And now I'm shooting the Zots, the 125 at the front. So really, for me to make my arrow any lighter, I would have to, one thing I could do is get rid of the vanes. And then the next thing would be just changing those half sets over to be. Yeah,
because these outserts are stainless, and then the insert can be alloys. So that's fine.
Yeah. So essentially I could potentially lose like an extra 20 to 30 grains just by doing that.
Which then you come down into that pretty good
550
zone.
Mark,
550, 540, you know. And that's where a lot of it's coming from, you know what I mean? Where you're going to be in that honey hole. So, and you'll find it. You'll see it at the 30 meters, 40 meters, and 50 meters. You can shoot those other arrows, and you'll watch them just fall out of the sky. You know, and if like we all try, like we're up there in the Cape, and when we're guiding and all that, we try and stick all the shots under 30 metres.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely.
30 yards, 30 metres, depending on who's talking in camp and that, but we try and keep it under there. The reason for that is, as guides looking after a client that's coming up, they're spending their hard-earned, they want to have the experience, but they also want to sit behind a pig with a big set of ivory there with a big silly grin. So we want to give them the best opportunities that they can.
100%.
So we want to keep it under there because our success ratio is so much better if you're keeping it under 30 metres. And most of the shots really are 20 metres and under, you know what I mean? And the success ratio is way better, you know what I mean? Instead of doing all the long bombs and stuff like that. So, you know, going back to what we do, like it's what I'm saying before, I've just found with my arrows, shooting what I shoot and all that stuff, it's the most efficient. The bow's quiet. It's flat shooting, you know?
Definitely. Yeah, it's a very interesting process too, right? Like if you can build that moral compass and make sure that all your shots are under 20, your success rate is going to go up.
Yeah.
Like extremely. Like it's going to be crazy to see the difference that you start to do in regards to putting down animals and not injuring anything. If you've got an injury problem right now, like get closer. That's the answer. Obviously have your bow tuned and make sure it's all firing right. Make sure that you've got it broadhead tuned, especially if you're finding that there's something going wrong. But yeah, I honestly think if you're getting to 20 meters, like you can almost guarantee as soon as you've clicked it on the string, it's going to be a proper good shot. At least a better chance of having a good shot. If it's an aware animal, obviously there's a lot that can go wrong. But yeah.
Yeah, there's so many different aspects of what we're talking about, you know what I mean? But there's a lot of modern society with this thing, Instagram and Facebook and all that, is people wanting to become famous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's a lot of things we have to be so careful on everything we do to keep this thing that we do, you know, like
definitely.
Call it your sport lifestyle. To me, it's a lifestyle because it's what I live and breathe.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a passion and it's what I make a living from. You know what I mean? So I don't want to jeopardize that when I see pretty ordinary photos, you know, and then where there's people could do better. You know what I mean? It's not hard.
Definitely.
It's not hard, and that's one thing that I personally pride, and I know that Matty does up there and Smithy and all that stuff. Is you have a look at other guided hunts that are around. And there's a few of them getting better now, but a lot of the guided hunts have just got the critter laying on the side, it's dead and all that. Where you have a look at the quality of the photos that we put out there at Adventures, we've all got flashes, we're all taking good photos, we're all depicting that animal in the best possible way we can. So it's a good thing, you know what I mean? Where
I was and it probably ties into exactly what you're talking about. When I went and hunted Grant's block and I got that good pig, that good boar.
Yeah.
The amount of effort that Grant went to make sure that the blood was as far gone as it could be, to make sure that he was in a good position, to make sure that we had a really good shot. Like we spent probably a good half hour to 45 minutes just sitting there trying to clean it firstly and trying to get a really good photo. That was pretty much like the process that he went through. And it was really kind of a bit of a wake up call to me in a sense. I was like, oh my God, like previously it's been like take a snap, walk off. Whereas it's like actually presenting it, giving a lot of, it's not necessarily for the sake of a grip injury, and that's not it. It's more so about the whole process of what you've just gone through to be able to make that happen. And for me, that was a many-year journey to get to that point. And he's like, you're going to want to savor this and remember this, and this is something you're going to want to share with a lot of people. It just seems like the best respect that you can give to the animal as well after that process.
Well, that's right. Like you said, mate, how hard's it been to get to that stage where you've been good enough to get into that position, unaware, take the shot, kill the animal humanely, and then you sit there and you go, oh yeah, whatever. And no, you take that photo, because then you're actually going to show people, and you're not going to be, oh no, it's got a bit of blood on it, or the arrow's still sticking out of the side of it. You know, it's really not that hard to have a look at what we're all doing. And then, you know, honestly, it takes 5 minutes to pull an arrow out, knock some blood with a bit of grass, throw some dirt on it, rub it down, you know, get everything right so that the grass is down in front or whatever like that, the way the sun is, move it, manipulate it, whatever it is. And, you know, whatever animal it is, because to me, I'm going to look at those people that do that, and you know that they've taken effort, and they're going to get more kudos with me because they're showing us in a good light, instead of the guys that when they do do a pretty ordinary shot, tongues hanging out the side and all that. It takes bugger all to say, oh, the tongue's hanging out, mate, just push it in or whatever. And then when you see them on Facebook or Instagram and they get their knickers in a knot when someone's just trying to say to them, hey, mate, we could do better and take it on board instead of going, oh, what's the fucking matter? Well, it does.
Yeah, it definitely does. Actually, I recorded a whole episode once and never aired it because it was just like it was about an incredible red deer that this guy had got on public land, but the actual story and what went down was like, it just wasn't a pretty story. It wasn't a pretty outcome. It wasn't how bow hunting should be displayed at all. I'm like, me airing this is going to get him hate. It's going to get me hate. It's going to get the sport bow hunting hate. And if anyone gets their hands on that, it's going to be used for more damage than it is for good. And so I just had a word with him like, hey, look, I'm sorry, I can't air that. Like, it's just not what we can be really airing or what we can be displaying bow hunting as. And I think realistically, as soon as you've got your phone and you've started bow hunting, you've now got a responsibility to make sure that you're not doing the wrong thing and you're not portraying it in a negative light.
Yeah, of course. And that's where a lot of people like, you just got to sit back for 5 seconds and think about, will this have any repercussions? Is this a good thing, what I'm doing? And like there's 99% of the people that are doing the right thing. It's always that 1% that we all get tarred with that same brush, isn't it?
Definitely.
Which sucks, to be honest, especially with the stuff that's going on in South Australia at the moment. It's freaking scary, and if people aren't worried about all that, we've all got to be starting to look at ourselves. And this is the first thing, is what we put out there can be ammunition for the other parties and all that stuff. So we just got to be careful so we can keep this lifestyle that we're doing. You know what I mean? Like you just said 100%. A second ago, 90% of your meat intake for the last 12 months has been from you harvesting it. You know what I mean? So that's pretty important for a lot of people. I know it's the same with myself. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. And like I said, it's not hard to change that. It's just we need to educate people, and I think there's the right people out there. There's the Brads and Brads doing all those sort of stuff that they're doing and all that, and there's a lot of more focus on this. I think now it's come about. I'm not seeing. It's been good actually. I'm not seeing the long bombs
as much
portrayed as much.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Whereas 18 months, 2 years ago, probably a little bit more, just as we basically stopped life for a couple of years, didn't we, with COVID and shit. Yes, but before that, it was like starting to get pretty full on with, I'm shooting them out to this distance and we promote this because they don't jump the string and blah, 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 and there's still a couple of rogues out there that are sort of pushing those envelopes, and you sort of hear a few stories about them when they're in their camp, and it's a bit disappointing because they get so many followers and stuff like that on Facebook and Instagram, and they're doing hunts. It's really not the right way to keep going forward anyway, in my opinion.
No, definitely. And I think realistically, we've also got social media to thank for that, in the sense of it's making things better. It's getting the messages across. It's getting
100%.
Like what you said, the Brads and Brads, and what you're saying. Like it's helping to spread that message further and make it more known, which I think is also very valuable as well. In regards to
and hopefully that overtakes it. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I think with enough of us chanting the same tone, eventually it'll all come around, right?
Yeah, 100%.
In regards to, like, you've been guiding for a fair few years now. Guiding versus hunting yourself, like, do you actually get to go out and hunt much yourself anymore?
Fuck no. Yeah, it's really funny. Like, you still hunt. You know what I mean?
You're still out there. You're
still doing it. You're just not. You're not pulling the bow back. You know what I mean? Like, and it took me. It was a very good journey, really. Like. Yeah, because I'm a hunter, you know what I mean? I like going out there. I like doing all that. And then all of a sudden, obviously, the opportunity come to go there. And I reckon it took me 2 years, maybe even 3. I reckon the third year I started to get it. You know what I mean? Like, where you'd get frustrated with the clients and you'd be like, I would have got that. You know what I mean? And then, you know what I mean? Something happened or whatever. And then I was like sitting back a couple of times, and because you get frustrated because you're putting the hard yards in, you're doing that. And then I reckon it was, like I said, it was the second end of the second season or the start of the third or something, where something clicked with me personally, where I was going, you know, it's not about me anymore. I've just got to say, put them in the right position, talk to them and say, this is what I'm doing and these are the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. It may work, it may not work, but I reckon we've got a pretty good chance. And as long as you're doing that to the clients, and I found a really big turn in my success with the clients and my mental health, I suppose you'd say, as far as frustration levels and stuff like that, where it was a lot more enjoyable, where, you know, everyone was on the same playing fields. And don't get me wrong, there's some days where you just see an absolute ball terror of a boar or something like that, and you just go, oh, you know,
give me your bow.
Because honestly, the biggest handicap up there is the wind in Cape York. It's
the definitely.
You're hunting these creeks that are twisting like a snake, you know, slithering away, and then 1 minute it's in your face, next minute it's up your ass, and it's just what you got to deal with. You know what I mean? And I'm a very aggressive hunter, and that's probably come from hunting in the Cape for so long. Like, I will not stuff around, and I've shown that to the clients, and that, like, if the wind's in their face, we've got a cattle pad, there's a boar line in the creek 50 metres in front of us, dead to the world, and the wind's blowing and you can hear it coming harder, we're running. We're running, you know, because like if you're on a cattle pad that's 6 inches, 8 inches wide, bull dust, there ain't no leaves.
Not going to make noise. Yeah, exactly.
No. How far can you run 30 metres? You could do that in, you know, say 7 or 8 seconds or whatever like that, with a bow and everything up in front of you. And you've just made 50-metre shot into a 15-metre shot, and you're shooting up on a creek bank, shooting down into a creek. Well, that's the difference between success and that, or a samba hunter taking 2 or 3 steps and sussing it out. And by that stage, the wind's gone. You've had your chance, and I'm just going to blow this way now.
Yeah. I absolutely love creek hunting, like that close-knit creek hunting. It's so much fun, especially when you are just amongst the pigs. I don't have that many pigs on my block, but that's where I'll always find them, and so it's some of the best fun hunting you'll do. And I had a lot of processes where, a lot of situations where I've been able to shoot multiple pigs from the same mob, because they don't know where it's coming from. And when the wind's good, it's good, but when it's not, it sucks.
It's a shocker. And that's where, like, you always see the new clients coming up. You just explain to them, and you say, oh, you know, the wind's going to be like, and we all, you know, everyone that's been up to the Cape will sit around having a cup of coffee in the morning and have brekkie, shoot a few arrows and talk until the, you know, 9:30, 10, and then we normally go out. We're waiting for it to heat up a little bit, animals to bed down, start to snooze pretty hard, you know, and go from there. And all of the clients will turn around and go, oh, the fucking wind. You know what I mean? Everyone cops it. It's like no one's special.
It's just bow hunting in general, right?
Oh, yeah, and it just seems to be, you know, whether you're on a swamp, on the ridges, in the creeks, whatever it is, you know, it just happens. But I enjoy it. I definitely enjoy the guiding. I enjoy loving all the new people we meet and all that sort of stuff, and helping and all that. And because it's basically, you know, we've turned that sort of, or Maddie's done it where, you know, we changed it all with tuning bows. And then getting the shoot right, getting their broadheads right, explaining to them. That was one thing that with us that I really enjoyed with what Matt made up there. And he made like a drill press, if you can think of, that's what it looks like. And it's got a scale on the bottom of it. And it's really been instrumental for a lot of the changes we've done with Cayuga broadheads, and how we've changed our tips on the heads, changed a lot of the designs and stuff like that to make our heads what they are today. And we will show
what you're doing is you're pushing it down onto pig pads, right? Like you've taken the
that's pad right. Sorry, I didn't explain that. What we do is up there, you shoot a really good boar, and like whoever the guide is, and they shoot a good boar, like the client does, and that we'll rip out if it's got a good fighting pad on it, we'll rip those pads out, throw them in our backpack, come home, we'll cut them into like 100 mil blocks and freeze them. And back in the old days when we used to have the shot shows and all that, Maddie built it for for that as a display at our stands.
Yeah.
And we'd have a whole esky full of these. Yeah,
Flying
pretty rank
pads.
by the Sunday afternoon, I'll tell you. Especially after you had a couple of sherbets on the Saturday night. It was a bit ordinary. But anyway, yeah, and we'd have all different. We'd have our heads there, and obviously we'd have our competitors' heads there. Mm-hmm. And you would allow them to show them. You just put the pad on this on the bottom where it holds it, and then you would zero the scales, and then you'd put this, basically it's got a little tube that you shove the shank of the broadhead in, shove it onto that, and then you say push it, and then as they're pushing it, the scale's reading on how much force it is to take that broadhead, push that broadhead through a fighting pad, because a fighting pad's a pig's a pretty special animal. You got we got one there last year, and I reckon it was probably 2 1/4 inches thick fighting pad, and so you've got to get through that gristle, then through skin, a rib, before you even get into the chest cavity to cut any arteries. You know what I mean? So, and then we sort of looked at it, and that's when with the pilot cut, when we had the original Tanto tip, we were pushing on that. We looked at what those ones were. They were sort of mid 20 pounds, to high 20 pounds, and then just by putting another cut on the tip and getting another extra grind on the tip, where people look at it and they go, oh, there's a lot of things going on. Well, it's like 18 pound now.
Yeah, wow.
We've decreased the pressure just by changing that. You know what I mean? And the same as other 3-blade heads on the market, where very popular head here in Australia, and and they're about 50 plus pounds to push through a fighting pad.
What was like some of the worst poundage that you'd see to push through a fighting pad? That was it. Yeah, wow.
That head. The worst has gone up to 109 on one of those big pads. Oh my God. Yeah, and that was a 3-blade.
Yeah, holy hell. And then the Zot, the king, what did it do?
Yeah, it's about 7 or 8 pounds, would you believe?
It's crazy.
And we actually had a client last year, and he had the iron wheels, so you look at them and everyone classes them as the top of the food chain over in America, and the Valkyries and all those sort of heads. And they said, let's pull it out and put it against it, and it beat it by a couple of pounds. So he was quite
surprised. The Zot did, you mean?
The Zot did,
Zot beat it, yeah.
Well, the thing is like I say, with the design on those heads, they've got a single blade at the start, and then it goes into a ferrule. So that transitional piece for that ferrule is where the pressure comes on, which causes more resistance, which pushes it up. Whereas the design on the Zot, the old school, and the pilot cut, it's a transitional taper on the ferrule. So that's why they're less resistance than other broadheads on the market, which have that, whatever it is, a single blade, then they've got a ferrule that's bolted, screwed, tack welded, whatever it is. Yeah,
creating extra friction on the way through. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also you look at it and you go, okay, how's the strength on that tip? If it's a single level, or is it, tapered with a bit more meat at the front? There's so much things in designing a broadhead. It's not just, or some people like copying and pasting other people's hard work and saying it's their ideas, but don't get me on that.
I'm actually very impressed. Like, obviously I've been a Koga shooter for a while, but on the other side of things, being good mates with you guys in general, something that I got to see was some of the big names that have actually been buying it from the States. And that's really impressive to see the caliber of shooters that you've got, like literally some of the best people known in the world for what they do as bow hunters and archery and even coaching, and they're all buying your gear now and like doing big mass orders. It was Grant sent me through a little picture one day, and had 3 names on there. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, especially the last probably 3 months or 2 months, I suppose. Yeah, it's a lot of abandoned ships from other manufacturers, and there's a lot coming over, and we're starting to get a lot more of a foothold in America, which is good, and we're doing it the way that we wanted to do it as a business. The 3 of us, Matt Moore, Grant Rand, and myself, as we're building the business up. So we have product, we have really good product. We're happy with what we're putting out on the market, and we know that we're we're pushing the envelope several years in advance from other people in the
Mm-hmm.
world. You know, there's been quite a few, like at the ATA show, there's another broadhead that brought out a similar system, and like we're a couple of years ahead of them, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it's
good.
just like,
Yeah.
it's good that 3 Aussie guys that, you know, are doing that with what we're pushing the envelope, and we're getting, like you said, we're getting some superstars that are shooting heads. And so I'm looking forward to what the next 12 months is, because we've got a few things that in the pipeline that are pretty exciting. So, yeah.
Definitely. I think it's pretty cool. I think something that Joe Rogan obviously has done for bow hunting in general is incredible. But I think what he's also done is proven how much Aussie bow hunters, we all know it because we get to hunt all year round. But I think a lot of the world don't understand that. They don't know that. And you know what you know when you're in America, you're like 6 weeks of bow hunting, that's all we get. When they're like, oh, hold up. 365 days of bow hunting. That's what they get in Australia. So it makes sense that the products that we're putting out are going to be probably of a higher quality when it's getting that much testing.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, like the testing that our heads get before they've seen the market it's crazy. I don't even, well, it was, some of them are 100 to 200, some of them are fucking way more than that. You know what I mean? Of animals that have been harvested and prototypes. Like, a lot of people don't understand, like, the prototypes, we're on the 5th one now of a new head, and we're waiting for that to come through, and hopefully it comes through today or tomorrow, and to test for this next rut in the next few weeks. But that's been over nearly 3 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because we're running a business. We're all of us have got our own businesses. Definitely. And we're running this business as well. So, and we're trying to build stuff. We've got other products coming out. You know, we've got our new arrow spinner that's just come out, and that's really successful because it's different to what other people have. It's a longer wheelbase, and it has an arrow squaring tool. So you get 2 tools for the price of one, pretty much. You know what I mean?
I love it. Love it, by the way. I've got my own.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It just works. You know what I mean? And they're things that we're testing. We've made several of them before we go, yeah, we're happy with that. You know what I mean? And we've all got to be happy. And we understand, and this is what people have to understand out there. There is no broadhead on the market that is infallible, right? But we try and make our heads as best as we possibly can. But
definitely,
they're not jackhammers that hit granite rocks. You know what I mean? Yeah, we don't advertise.
Not going to penetrate, no.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And at this time of the year, go for the 150s, go for the 175s if you're shooting big stags at 15, 20 metres, you know, front on because you're quartering them on. Don't go the light setups because obviously you're going through bone. You know, be smart about what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, horses for courses on everything you do. You know what I mean? Just be smart about it.
Yeah, definitely. Something I didn't ask before that I meant to was what are your actual ambitions with your hunting? Like, I know obviously the guiding's there, it's always probably going to be a part of what you do, but on your actual own side of hunting, is there goals that you still want to tick off?
Yeah, it's I want to chase a moose, and that's one thing that I wanted to do. It's so cool. And it's not so much the moose, because when you sort of see them and all that when they're in the rut, but I just want to go to Alaska. I just want to see the country. You know what I mean? Like, every video I see, I just see the colours of the landscape, and that's just,
it looks incredible, doesn't it? And have you got into Alone and all those shows that are coming out that they put people in the Alaskan wild to survive?
Oh, I've been told about it a few times where they do it. There's some of the supposed to be tough guys, and they go out within a day or something. Is that the ones?
That's the ones, yeah. So essentially it's like survivalist specialists. They get put into the wild and they have to survive. Alone, I think you can watch on binge maybe. And then I actually just saw another one that's just come out on Netflix called Outlast is that one. I watched the first episode, and it's not survivalist specialist. Like, there is some in there, but it's literally like they have to be a part of a team. So they're throwing a whole survivalist specialist in there. I guess hope that they're fending for everyone else, because there's some people in there that are just like, they've had a hard life and that's all they've got going about them. So like, oh yeah, I'm resilient. It's like, oh yeah, but you don't know anything about the wild. Like, you're probably going to kill yourself. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. No, I think a moose would be incredible. Have you done much hunting overseas?
No, I've done bugger all. I just hunted a lot around Australia, basically. I was lucky. I sort of was pretty much hunting a lot when I was younger. Then once I become a plumber, did that, and then I finished my apprenticeship, and then I went up to Darwin and did that for a few months, and then travelled there, shot a buffalo in '95, and shot some donkeys and did all that sort of stuff back in there, and then went across to Strathburn. Actually, I was the second bow hunter over in Strathburn. The first guy was Nat Neeson when the Frasers used to own it. Yeah, we were over there, and we got a magazine in Catherine, and when we were staying in there, and this is story, with all these pig tusks and that, and me and my mate looked at it and went, "What do you reckon we give him a ring?" And he goes, "Yeah," and yeah, so we just dropped our third mate off at Three Ways, and then we smoke bombed it from there across to Cairns and then up into Strathburn. And I think we're only supposed to be there for a week. We got along with John Fraser really well, and we ended up I think it was like 13 or 14 days we stayed there with them, it was unbelievable, and got a creek named after us because every pig we tried shooting tried eating us. So that's called Aggressive Creek, and it's still named to this day,
That's incredible.
Yeah, pretty funny story. And then obviously years later, I'm up there bloody guiding and stuff, and still haven't seen all the place. You know what I mean? Like, in all the time I've been up there's Maddie's now lucky enough to have a grader. So I think this is the second or third year that he's had the grader, and each year, last year was probably the best, where he's had the most fuel in the thing and help and all that stuff, where he's opened up the most tracks, and he's just opening up more and more tracks each year, which opens up more and more country that hasn't been hunted. You know what I mean? So
it's crazy.
It's a pretty special play. And obviously now we're like Matt would have to tell me, but I think it's 7 years now, I think, of him running Cayuga
up there.
So it's bow hunting only, you know what I mean? And so I'm finding from the very start to now, the pig numbers are so much better, and how many piglets there are. And
how's it transitioned the actual manner of the pigs, like the way that they act?
Way better, because because where I used to hunt was more classed as the golf. Since I've been hunting up in the Cape since '99 every year, bar one, and the pigs over there, like, I was lucky to be on those properties where it was not hard for you to shoot a couple of pigs and be on the beers by the afternoon. You know what I mean? Like, it was just an unbelievable spot. And then when I first went over there with Matty and that, because obviously when he took it over, it'd been a rifle excursion before that, or business. And it was basically, as soon as they heard a vehicle, they were doing Harry Houdini, you know what I mean? All you'll see was a cloud of dust, you know? And I was sitting there scratching my head, and we sort of knew that it was going to be a long-term goal. And then that's now, it's what I call McDonald's hunting, where you're driving to somewhere or across to somewhere else, or coming back at the end of the night. And I say, we're on a ridge now, boys, look out the side. And then there's a big doughy boar just there mooching around, come out of the creek, and he's up there looking at nunga nuts and stuff like that. And he doesn't even, he might stop. He might stop swooshing his tail and just stay still, and then you just go, all right, he's next to that big white tree with the overhanging branch, and we drive a couple 100 meters up, and the car that I use is called the limo. It's quite a quiet car, so you just come to a roll, turn the thing off. We just sit there for a minute, slowly get out, grab the bows, see which way the wind's going. Obviously, if we know which way the wind's going, I'll stop, I'll turn around, and I'll drive back past them to get the wind right for the clients, because that's how doughy they are, And then obviously, if you get that success, it's always called a McDonald's pig, Yeah, with the whole drive.
That's great. That's absolutely great. Well, mate, that's almost been 2 hours. That's crazy. That's gone incredibly fast.
Wow.
But let's maybe call it there then. So where's the best place for people to reach out to you if they're not following? So since your first podcast you did with us, you've actually had an Instagram hack, I believe. So it's slightly changed, but much the same. Yeah.
So now it's called Ian Summers Official. So I've put that down. And then I've got another account there too, which is Summers Archery. So you'll find me on both of them. I'm on Facebook as well, and that's how most people do it. The other half still wanting to get my website up, but I've just been slack with getting a few photos for her. So we're working on that. And but most of the time through that, you'll just send me a message and all that sort of stuff, and I'll try and get back to you. If I don't get back to you, don't feel like I'm being rude. Just do it again, because I might have missed you, because it's I get hammered fair bit during the day. And, and since I've come up to Brisbane, it's been it's been at that time when I've, obviously I've had my little daughter and Saranda and I, so it's been a good journey. We had her in January, so it's been pretty full on with moving from Sydney to Brisbane and then setting up a new shop. And then obviously I'm new blood in Queensland, so a lot of people are coming to me, which I've been enjoying. Also, it's the rut, so so just realised that I've been pretty busy, and if I have neglected you, send
mass
another
changes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No small events have happened in your life this year. Let's put it that way.
Oh no, it's like it's left
You chose it all at once, didn't you?
Yeah, there's a few uppercuts in there as well. I was like, but no, it's life's good at the moment. I'm really enjoying Queensland. Been quite muggy, but everyone that lives in Queensland saying the same thing. I think it is what it is, and having a daughter, it's changed the perspective on a lot of things in life too. So it's been good.
No, mate, that's incredible. Well, thanks for sharing your knowledge again, mate. I think this is going to be another hit.
No, awesome. Well, hopefully it is, and thanks for your time, mate.
So welcome.